I would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, OSHA Hazard Communication Labeling and SDS Update. My name is Pia Bernardo and I'm the training consultant at Coggno. I'd like to take a moment to thank our partner community who have invited their members and clients to attend today's event. Coggno partners with many different business segments to provide online training courses directly from their website so their members and clients have a convenient place to purchase the training they need. We have thousands of courses in virtually every business topic available in our marketplace, including human resources, software, business management, and soft skills training, to name a few of the topics available. So be sure to check out our website to search the options. If you are not a Coggno partner, email me today at info@coggno.com and I'll send you information on how to sign up. It's easy and completely free of charge. Today, we have with us Philip Landry, an experienced and educated H.S.E. professional with over 25 years in heavy industry, ranging from hazardous materials disposal to manufacturing within large multinational firms. Philip is the current president and owner of H.S.E. Partnering Solutions since 2012, which is dedicated to providing outsourced health, safety, and environmental management for manufacturing and industrial service firms. Since OSHA's alignment with the Global Harmonization System, or GHS, Mr. Landry has been involved in training and development of process to help companies understand the requirements OSHA has put in place to align with this international standard. As this OSHA standards changes come into full effect, many companies find they are behind and need to catch up. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thank you very much, Pia, for that great introduction. I would say everybody Happy New Year, and I'd like to get started with the Hazard Communication Labeling and SDS Update course. One or two caveats to this course, and I'll remind everybody is, first of all, this course or this topic will kind of cover some of the hazard communication updates that are needed to be done. This is equivalent to probably the 2013 training that should have been done for all employees. So while it covers the hazard communication standard, it does not cover all of the facets of it. It is definitely not a complete approach to health and safety with hazard communication. Having said that, you know, while I have been in industry and done a lot of work around the hazard communication standard, I will say there are others in the field who are actually experts at the classification and GHS standards that really get to the meat and potatoes of the hazard communication standard. In specific, I would recommend or reference the Society for Chemical Hazard Communication. I believe it's SCHC in the United States. They are a tremendous resource and have a lot of experts to really define a lot of the intricacies of the HazCom standard. But today we're going to focus our discussion around some of the things that are changing for employees and the things that your employees should already know regarding the HazCom standard. So let's get started here, and I guess at the end of the training session, what we're going to do is ask you to get a few questions out there, and Pia and I will kind of go through those for you. So if you think of something, certainly text it off to the coordinators, and they will get those questions to me as we get finished up. All right. So let's start here. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So you know, obviously in today's world, despite hazard communication being around for quite some time, It's still listed high up on the list of the top 10 most frequently cited standards, and you see here in 2014, it's number 2, right? It has been around for a while, and it is, I will say, when I go on site to different places, probably one of the most obvious areas of health and safety that is lacking. It is amazing how many companies still don't do this well, considering the amount of time it's been around. So again, if you're a company that is facing OSHA citations or OSHA inspections, certainly hazard communication is going to be one of those things that they're going to look at. All right. So historical timeline, like I said, HAZCOM's been around for a while. I think starting in 1983, you have the standard created. I'm sure there was some promulgation time before that. Obviously, we all know that OSHA takes a little bit of time to put together regulations and whatnot because of the kind of act of Congress type of lawmaking that has to be done. So we're talking, what are we talking now? Over 30 years of time has passed, and I guess we're evolving, getting better, and this current GHS standard is really to try to bring the whole, not only the United States, but to kind of keep us in line with the rest of the global harmonization system so that people can recognize hazards wherever they are. Right? 1989, HAZCOM applies to all industry. 1992, right, the UN Conference on Environment and Development starts, the GHS. So way back in 92, they started GHS. Right, first edition of GHS created in 2003, and 2012 revision of the HAZCOM standard is what we're talking about today. And in 2013, the HAZCOM standard completed, and some of the training that we're talking about today is actually the material that should have been covered in mid-2013 for all of your employees. Okay, and then obviously 2016, we're again looking at HAZCOM standard kind of going into full implementation in the middle of the year, and I see a lot of companies going, holy cow, how are we going to comply with this now? So there has been a lot of time, to get there. I think just like any other health and safety standard, sometimes a little procrastination is what ends up happening for most companies. So, all right, required hazard communication changes. We talked about the history of it, but if you look at December 1st, 2013, you're supposed to train all employees on the new label and SDS format, and that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. 2015, compliance with all the modified provisions of the final rule, except the distributor shall not ship containers labeled by chemical manufacturer or importer unless it's HAZCOM compliant label. Those two dates, right? Back in 2015. 2016 is where we're at now, and we're going to update alternative workplace labeling. That means the labels that you actually use in the workplace, and basically require the HAZCOM programs to be updated fully with the new changes, right? So this is the real one that we're talking about now in 2016, and I guess what I would say is that you're going to see a lot of employers really scrambling to get together their HAZCOM programs and make sure that their employees are trained. So the training program we're going through today will actually be on the Coggno site, and it's actually an interactive training program, so that there's not a live presenting person like myself right there. It's actually a formatted program to teach people, employees, about the labeling and SDS changes. So it'll kind of get you at least to the 2013 level. All right. There's four main components of HAZCOM. Right? You've got labeling, safety data sheet preparation, use and storage, non-routine work or contractor safety, and then last you have employee training. All right? In my mind, these are the four main areas that companies need to address. I know that if you go on the OSHA site, there's a how to implement that standard, But these are the four basic tenets in my mind, and so today, like I said, the labeling and the SDS preparation or SDS changes are going to be talked about. Training is obviously important too. Like I said, this is not a course to cover every single thing about HAZCOM. It's really just focusing on number 1 and 2 here. All right, hazard communication container types. In the HAZCOM standard, there's 4 different container types, right? Shipping containers, workplace containers. Another thing I like to call solids that are not articles, which has its own kind of labeling setup, and then temporary containers. All right. If your employees understand that these 4 types of containers have different labeling requirements, then I think you're teaching them kind of the basic ideas of what they need to see when they're either shipping something out or just putting something in the workplace. All right. So shipping containers themselves, all right, moved in or out of facilities through the road, air, rail, or sea. DOT placard symbol takes precedence on packaging. So we're going to talk about the basic symbols that are on DOT packages versus the placards that are on the HAZCOM standard. And there's a little bit of a difference in the 2 of them, but the DOT, if something's going to be shipped out, it's going to actually take the DOT placard symbol as a precedent. All right. Containers must be undamaged and properly marked for use. Selected properly for container compatibility, durability, and safety. And I think one of the things that's surprising to a lot of employees is that they actually have to ship things out in the right and chemically compatible container. And a lot of this work has been done in the background by people who are qualified, but nonetheless, it's something that employees should know a little bit about. All right, shipping containers, and this is a slide from one of the interactive modules that regarding this subject, but it basically goes on to show people that there are DOT hazard marking containers on all shipping containers, or there should be, and that this United Nations coding system is going to tell the person what kind of drum or container it is, what type of material of construction is there, what type of open head or closed head packaging it is, and what DOT shipping packing group is going to be included. And as the training goes, it specifies further about where it was manufactured, et cetera, et cetera. But employees need to know that if they're shipping things out, that they should have, if it's a hazardous material, there should be some type of marking on the packaging that indicates that it will be a shipping container. And in fact, this is how they a lot of times will be able to tell whether it's considered a shipping container or not. All right. Some common examples for shipping containers around the world. You have cylinders that have embossed numbers or engraved numbers on the side. Wooden packages for laboratory things that are packed up. Again, another cylinder. This is a DOT tank, tow tank that basically contains some type of either liquid or semi-viscous fluid. And then obviously the standard DOT 55 drums. So again, these DOT markings are shipping containers, and shipping containers are the ones that is a different type of a group. It requires a different type of labeling versus the other types of packages. All right, so workplace containers. Here we are again. These can hold hazardous materials. They may be, suited to do that job, but in the HAZCOM standard, they're obviously going to get a little bit different type of labeling. All right, some things that might be in the workplace would be like these standardized tanks that might get moved around in the plant, or they might be a stationary container that's inside the plant that is used all the time in the same place. Portable, gasoline type tanks, and then also, totes and bins and other things that are around your shop. All right. The workplace containers, the only difference between those and the shipping containers is that they're not specifically designed for shipping outside of the facility, and they typically will not have those markings. Now, if there is a DOT compatible shipping container, like maybe the drums or whatever we just saw, and that particular container is only staying in the facility, it's never going out of the facility, it can be labeled like a workplace container. It doesn't have to be labeled as a shipping container just because it has DOT markings. Yeah. So it's kind of a matter of semantics more than it is of just markings. Okay. So I get a question here. What about piping systems? And I think I looked at this through some of the online questions that OSHA has to do, and the reality is, although there is hazardous material in some piping systems, depending on the chemical or the facility, they do not, that is, OSHA does not consider piping systems to be considered a container. So they don't need to have that full HAZCOM standard labeling on them. And there are other guidance documents and things that control piping and systems in the plant, but that's for another discussion. So, solid material containers. So this is the third type of container. The HAZCOM standard specifies that if you have something that has hazardous material on it or in it that may be released during actual use, which is not an article, and there, obviously you see the wording up there on the right, then this particular material would be considered kind of a solid hazardous material, and I use the word containers on it because it does require slightly different labeling requirements than a regular chemical, if you will. So we're going to talk a little bit about an article for a second to kind of further classify this, but basically, if there's a material like this wood here you see, and it happens to have a kind of a penetrant in it, or an oil or something that's in it that may have certain hazardous properties to it, and those properties could be released during processing of it, that would be something that would be considered hazardous material, and if it's not an article, it would need to be labeled. So there's a certain way that you need to label those too. So let's talk about an article first, right? An article, with the strict definition in HAZCOM, is an article means a manufactured item other than a fluid or particle which is formed to a specific shape or design during manufacture, right? Which has end-use functions dependent in whole or in part upon its shape or design during end use, and which under normal conditions of use does not release more than very small quantities, minute or trace amounts of hazardous chemical, all right, as determined under paragraph G. So it goes on. It goes on to further define this, but in short, an article is something that's shaped like something. All right. In the case of the wood or the steel beam that I showed you a little earlier, if they actually have hazardous materials that may be released during the use of those products, meaning cutting or sawing or welding or whatever it may be onto those, then they are required to have a label along with an SDS for that material. And again, we'll talk about the labeling a little bit, but that labeling on a solid material is a little bit different than a regular chemical, say. And a little question down the bottom is, would an article, and this is something I usually go through with classes, is that, you know what, if it definitely doesn't have a shape, it's just a regular wood beam and it's going to be further processed and it has the material in it that may be hazardous, then yes, it would be considered, it would not be considered an article, excuse me. All right. And then the last type of containers are temporary containers, all right? And temporary containers typically are found in the workplace. They are used as kind of in an active batch or processing operation, whereby the employee will actively use that material. And in this case, you see a labeled workplace container right here on this workbench, and then you see the person grabbing a certain amount of this material, and they're going to go ahead and dump that into a batch or some other area to use right away. that is really what the temporary container, it's a labeling restriction or labeling exemption is. And so when you have portable temporary containers, you don't need to label them because you're going to use them right away. This is a very big slippery slope for a lot of manufacturers because they intend to use something as a portable temporary container, and they kind of get away from that HAZCOM labeling standard, but then they let the container sit there for half a day with either half full or whatever it is, and um, the standard is very specific about its exemption use is for the immediate use of a nearby worker, etc. So just be careful when you're talking about portable temporary containers, and I always tell companies this is, if you're going to really use it immediately and it's right away, then the exemption applies, but it does not apply for something that's going to sit there for an hour. Okay, so those are the temporary. Those are the four containers. Shipping, workplace containers, solids, and then the last one, temporary containers, and they all have a different types of labels, right? So, this is an example from a workplace at one point in time that I saw. Is this material labeled properly, right? If you got it in your eyes, would you know what to tell people? What to tell the emergency medical technician it was? Right, so proper labeling must follow the new OSHA regulations modeled after the H.S.E standard. Right, so again, right here, you really don't know what this is, and that's what you'll see at a lot of places. This would be considered a workplace container. Probably doesn't get shipped out. It probably doesn't ever go anywhere, and it's not for the immediate use for someone. So basically, it kind of just sits there, and this would be an example of an OSHA violation. All right. So when we get to the labeling elements, what we're going to talk now is what actually needs to go on those types of containers, and then we can close it up by saying, all right, the shipping containers need these type of labels, the workplace containers need these type of things, and then the other two need these type of labeling elements. All right, but first let's go into the 6 specific categories of labeling elements that are required. Right? So the first is the product identifier. Right, name of the substance, mixture, or alloy, which may be a chemical, name of the substance that make it hazardous. Right. Here's the caveat is it must be the same as the SDS product ID. So in other words, employees can match up what's on the label with what the SDS says. All right. So this is kind of standard, and like if you have a trade name on your chemical, cleaner PDQ or whatever the name is, then your SDS needs to have a product identifier as cleaner PDQ also. We're going to go second class is a signal word. All right, and the signal word is used to convey the level of hazard of a particular physical or health hazards, right? So it's right down here, a word used to indicate the relative level of severity of hazard category and alert the reader to a potential hazard on a label. All right, the first one is warning, and obviously it symbolizes less than an immediate danger. It is a warning that you're looking for. All right. Someone's face might go, kind of a good example of that is someone here. This person looks really like kind of warned, like, ooh, geez, it's dangerous, but maybe not an immediate hazard. Excuse me. All right. And the next one is danger, and there's the level of severity there, just to kind of use pictures. Now, those are the only 2 signal words that you should see on a GHS compliant label, is either warning or danger, not both. Okay. Okay. Hazard statement. All right. The hazard statement is a phrase assigned to the hazard class and category which describes the nature of the hazardous material. Right. So we'll go back to there. The hazard statement, it further describes. So the first statement would be maybe warning. And then the next statement you get would be, for a pyrophoric solid, would be catches fire spontaneously if exposed to air. Or in this case, maybe danger, because this is a very serious hazard, right, depending on the level of hazard there. Right? So another example would be an oxidizing gas. All right, that would say, oh, may cause, or intensify fire, oxidizer. So these are, again, statements which further describe the hazard. So the first part is warning or danger, and then the next part is the hazard statements, which kind of tell you further what the hazards are in the material. All right. Third one is the one that everybody knows, right? Pictograms. It's described as a graphical composition that may include a symbol plus other graphical elements such as a broad border, background, pattern, color, is intended to convey specific information. And the whole idea of the pictograms are that you can immediately identify. The idea is that everybody can identify these type of hazards by looking at that picture, and that's really one of the beautiful things about the GHS system, is that no matter which language the label might be in, even if it's the wrong language, you can still tell something about a chemical by looking at these pictograms because they are international, and that is very much a unifying thing that's being done. And I think when you start seeing some of the labels here, you'll get what I mean. First, they're easily recognizable, standardized, always have a red border on them, and they're not a DOT placard. Okay, and again, like I said, DOT placards will take precedence on shipping containers if, in fact, it's going out over the road or the air or wherever it's going. And a DOT label does not have a red border on it, and so they're all different types of colors, and we'll talk about that. But they also have what's called a hazard class on there for a shipping. Right? So here's an example of a DOT label. Here you see the oxidizer symbol, but you see a different colored background. There's no red border, and then there's the number 5.1 over in the bottom corner. That would denote the hazard class of a DOT marking. Okay, and these are not GHS pictograms. Okay, so now we're getting into the GHS pictograms. You'll see the next, I believe there's 9 that we have. 8 of them are required, and 1 is an optional one. But we'll go through that as we talk. Also, obviously, flammable, right? Oh, let's go back here. So flammable covers all of the chemicals like gasolines or even aerosol cans and that type of thing. It obviously is very simple to recognize. Everybody knows the symbol. Everybody understands it right away. Now this one's a little bit less recognizable because of the fact that it does have a flammable kind of symbol there, but it has the big O, which is for the oxidizing material. Some chemical like hypochlorites or bleaches or oxygen. These are all things that will help combustion occur at lower flash points, and therefore is still a fire hazard. Exploding bomb, obviously, I think everybody knows, kind of what that symbolizes. It will be any kind of, explosive material or compound, but also can include things like organic peroxides that have what's called a self-accelerating decomposition temperature that may actually cause the material to decompose violently. So there's several classes of materials that fall into that, and I think everybody can tell what that is right off the bat. There's a standard corrosion one. I think everybody understands that things like sulfuric acid or sodium hydroxide or anything that may corrode metal or skin will be included in this category. It's a universal symbol, I think, that works well. New one that probably not a lot of people have seen is the compressed gas cylinder one. It's basically a black cylinder shape that kind of shows everybody that, all right, this is a compressed material. All right, these things will typically have high standard pressures that can be released if in fact there is some kind of physical damage to them. So. Next one up, is health hazards, and this is really for toxicity or any kind of hazard to a person from a toxic standpoint, or poisons. Typically, the skull and crossbones will be reserved for those things that are extremely toxic or dangerous to your life and health at fairly small quantities. And without getting into the technical aspects of it, a lot of poisons and a lot of toxics will have this particular thing. And this is a universal symbol. I think everybody understands it. So. All right, the next one that is here is probably not as well known, and this is one of the new ones, that is the exclamation part, right? So I listed some of the things down there that would be included in this category. You see category 4, low acute toxicity, oral, skin, and inhalation categories. Number 2 for low skin and corrosion irritation. Right, it's category 2A for eye irritations. I know I'm giving you some technical terms as far as what gets put onto an MSDS, but I guess the easy way to sum this one up is if it doesn't have a poison or a corrosive sticker, because it doesn't really rise to that level of hazard, you may have a health hazard exclamation part, and I think the hazard statements after the actual warning or danger comments on the label will further guide people. And the good thing about this, I think, when people see the exclamation point, the employees should be thinking, okay, I got to read on further. This is one that's really not giving you an exact definition of what the issues are. So, but it does alert people to the fact that there may be other concerns that they need to consider. So those are the pictograms. Oh wait, we forgot one more. We got health hazards. Sorry. So and the health hazard symbol, obviously, I guess also known as Starman or other different names, but it indicates to people that there's like a respiratory sensitization that might go on, or it's a carcinogenic material which may cause severe illness. So these are typically for hazards that are not really acute, like some of the, when I say acute, I mean things that take effect immediately. This particular thing may be a chemical that might cause a toxic health or carcinogenic health effects over long periods of time. All right, so people will look and see that this is something that may affect their health down the road. So they will look on further to understand exactly what those hazards were. All right, and then we'll get to the last one, which is environmental hazards. And this is this is actually not even required as a part of the HAZCOM law, because of the fact that it would denote certain types of environmental hazards on packages or on chemicals that are packaged and shipped. Everybody knows the Environmental Protection Agency is in charge of all the environmental hazards, so OSHA really can't regulate labeling for environmental hazards because of the kind of separation between the two groups. But I think more and more you may see this, especially in European countries, you may see this more and more to alert people that, you know, hey, even though it's really not hazardous, you shouldn't be putting this down the drain, or you should not be putting this into the water system, right? Or in the ground. So anyway, those are the 9 pictograms that we have. 8 of them are required. This one particularly is not. So that brings us back. You know, so your label has to have a product identifier, a signal word, a hazard statement, right? The signal words, danger or warning. Hazard statements further telling you about what the hazard is, and the pictograms to kind of picturize and to really crystallize what it is the hazard is. And then lastly, you got precautionary statements, right? And then precautionary statements are phrases that describes, recommends measures which should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to or improper storage handling of a hazardous product. All right, there are 4 main categories of precautionary statements. All right, and it's prevention, response, storage, and disposal. All of these categories relate to some way to deal with that chemical. And let me just get back here. I guess. Well, you know what? Let me just do this. So I'll do this. I'm going to go back to this. So prevention would be to prevent material from actually being a hazard to someone. So it may say things like keep away from sparks or handling the material in an enclosed environment. Response may actually talk about what you would do if, in fact, there was a spill or release of the material. Storage talks about the types of conditions in which you can store it to prevent a hazard. Like, in other words, keep material cool. All right, and then disposal typically will say, that you will have to dispose of it in a, regulated, area or regulated, facility, and obviously that is going to have to do with your local environmental regulations. So prevention, response, storage, disposal. All right. And then we'll go to the design of them. Basically, these precautionary statements are going to have main statements that are in bold print. Right? If there's a slash or a hash mark at statement means you have a choice of either or the items. Any kind of quotations means that not all conditions are listed, right? Excuse me, not quotations, but the three dots here that signify kind of etc., if you will, would say that there's more information. You have to read more information on the SDS. Right. Italics in a statement further qualifies specific conditions, so they kind of want to further qualify something. They'll put it in italics to make sure that the precautionary statement applies only if the italics condition is there. All right. And then lastly, the statements in a bracket indicate conditions that only apply if the bracketed statement applies. So something like will deteriorate quickly into a flammable gas if temperature is over 400 degrees. And the if over 400 degrees might be in the bracketed statement. All right. So those are the precautionary statements, and that's the kind of the last meat and potatoes section of the GHS labeling requirements, and the last section is the company name, address, and telephone of the chemical manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. And this is the sixth labeling element, which is required for all shipping containers. And I think everybody understands why all six categories would be required, because if you're going to ship something out over the road, there needs to be a responsible party or someone to call should something dangerous happen. All right, and here's an example of kind of a GHS compliant label that you can kind of see off of any of the websites these days. It indicates the kind of the generic name or the name of the material, right? And in section 2 here, we've got these pictograms, right? We talked about the hazard statements and the signal words, right? So a signal word here is danger, and then for all the hazard precautionary statements, right? Flammable gas contains gas under pressure, may explode if heated. So these are kind of further qualifying that danger, right? And then you've got some precautions over here from prevention, storage, and the like that we just talked about, precautionary statements. All right. And then lastly, here's your indication of who is actually responsible for it, right? In this particular case, they have first aid information listed as well. So the main thing is that every employee will be able to see these pictograms and understand immediately that, wow, it's toxic, it has flammability, it's under pressure, and I obviously can't have this go into the waterways or to the environment. So I think, labeling-wise, we're certainly upgrading these and giving people more information, and we're also giving them pictures to immediately identify what the hazards are. So now the real challenge is to make sure that your employees understand what these symbols mean and what the labels, what they should be looking for on the labels. And that's what has been out there since 2013. And it will actually be something that can be trained on an individual basis with the Coggno site that has the training for the GHS labeling and SDS changes that we're talking about today. Okay, so alternate labeling for workplace containers, right? NFPA 704 diamond. So workplace containers are required to have the sections 1 through 5 labeling elements that we talked about, or alternative labeling of equivalent designation. So in other words, people need to be able to understand what the hazards are from your alternative labeling. All right, so the HAZCOM standard does not limit you to using just the SDS container labels, but they want you, if you have an alternative labeling system that works for you, and I know a lot of people use the 704 diamonds because if they have larger tanks and things like that, they want the fire department to understand exactly what the hazard is immediately, and this is something that might help them do that. But it's just an example. Obviously, I'm not recommending anything. There are several other types of labeling systems out there, and they do, the GHS does allow for them in the workplace. Okay, and that's something that the workplaces are going to have to work out over the next couple of months, because it is due to be done this year, as we said earlier in the presentation. Okay, so now we're going to get to the MSDS, right? So MSDSs, old MSDSs, material safety data sheets up here on the left side, you had 8 different sections, and when they first came out, they obviously had some information on them, and they were pretty good. And as we evolved, I think ANSI put a standard out regarding the SDS generation. When it first, this is way back when they first started doing it. I think that went up to like 12 different sections, and then now we've evolved into the 16 section SDS, which is required by GHS. In the United States, you'll notice that there are 5 different sections down below here on the right-hand side that are colored in blue, and the sections 12 through 16. And the reason that they're colored in blue is they're not actually legally required by OSHA in the United States to be put onto the SDS, and that is because, again, there are other regulatory bodies that control that information. So just to go through it fairly quickly, identification obviously is going to be that section that tells you what the chemical name is and some of the information about either the supplier or where the storage facility is that contains this material, or any of the identifying information, especially if the label, the label and the identifying information have to match up. So that's really the key part. Hazard identification, we'll talk about the chemical hazards, the signal word and or hazard statement may be contained in this area. First aid measures, composition, Composition will be the section where they have exactly what's in the SDS, what makes up the chemicals that they're being shipped. There's all kinds of caveats of whether or not something is a trade secret or whether they have to divulge it, but the basic composition of material should be there in Section 3. First aid measures are Section 4. I think that's pretty straightforward. Section 5 is the firefighting issues, firefighting needs. 6 is accidental release of the chemical, what to do. Basic information there about emergency response. Handling and storage is those precautions to prevent storage, prevent issues that would cause releases in storage. Section 8 is exposure control. Again, this will talk about your permissible exposure values or the typical types of concentrations that might be in the air if there's a sudden release, and it will tell you what you need to do to protect yourself. All right. Physical chemical properties are the share of, physical characteristics that engineers might use to design any kind of handling systems around the product that they're working with. It gives you all kinds of things like vapor pressures and viscosities and amount, weight per gallon or densities. So number 10 is stability and reactivity. So that will tell you if something actually is reactive. Something, danger may cause evolution of hydrogen gas upon contact with water. Might be one. So any of those, anything that might react, like we talked about organic peroxides, right? That they may not be so stable if they get heated over a certain temperature. All right. Oop, get back here. And then lastly, toxicological data, and that's going to talk about your contact with these materials, how dangerous they are. LD and LC50s, which are, different toxicology terminologies, and without getting into really detail on that, it's going to give you the information of how toxic they are. Ecologic. Now getting into the stuff that's not regulated or not required to be on the SDS by OSHA is ecological data, which may say, what kind of toxicity it is in water, and will it kill a whole bunch of fish, or is it bad for the land, etc. Disposal considerations may actually go into the specific disposal considerations in the U.S. Again, these are all sections which aren't required, but can be added. And I think a lot of times I'm seeing, especially for companies that do international shipping and whatnot, they kind of have to have these things on there anyway, so they are adding a lot of them. And last three categories I'll go over quick is transportation info, so DOT information. Regulatory information might talk about reporting or whether or not a chemical is a California regulated chemical, or is required to be submitted under EPA's Tier 2 or whatever it may be, whatever regulatory group. And then lastly, other information will supply sometimes the revision numbers and other contact information if you want to find out about the actual SDS itself. So as you can see, I guess there's a lot of changes over the last 33 years. They've added a lot of sections, and I guess I would say teaching employees where to go for certain information might be key. It certainly might be part of your HAZCOM training program to just let them know what the sections are, and then also to really train them on the specific chemicals that you have at your site. All right, so that brings us to training requirements, and I'm going to get through this quick because we're getting close to the end of the hour. But training is initially before working at the facility, right? You want to teach employees that before they get exposed to things, that they know what hazard chemicals they're working with, right? Every time the hazard communication process or program changes, you need to update them. So say you locate your SDSs somewhere different than they used to be. You should be updating your employees. All right, when hazardous material exposure changes, maybe you added or took away hazardous exposure and you want to tell them about it. So those are kind of like regular routine updates that employees should get. Okay. And then on content, right, you got to have the physical and health hazards of the chemicals they work with. They're going to know how to detect exposure and recognize the warning properties of exposure, right? So a chemical smells really bad, or a chemical is, you'll see like a gray gas come off of the material if it's reacting, or what they need to know what the warning properties of exposure are, right? Maybe it's something that will cause nausea, or maybe a headache if it's a solvent, right? Know how they can properly protect themselves from exposure in the workplace. So this is obviously just as important as knowing what the chemical hazards are, right? If they don't know how to protect themselves, then are you really giving them all the information they need to do hazard communication properly? So those are just basic training requirements of the HAZCOM standard. And like I said, today we're talking about labeling and SDS changes. This is really what you need to do for your site once you have a comprehensive HAZCOM program in place. Okay, like I said, your site-specific one will have roles, locations, and management of SDS and listening, site-specific hazardous materials locations, workplace labeling, and other labeling information, working process for new materials, right? So how are you going to bring new materials into the facility? Contractors and site workers, how are you going to deal with them? How are you about non-traditional work? And then lastly, creation of SDS in some places. Right. So there's a lot of detailed elements. We're just talking about the labels and the SDS today, but I think a lot of companies are going to be facing making sure that these things are in place before the deadline approaches this year. All right. So along with Coggno, talk about the benefits of interactive training. These modules, the one I'm talking about today specifically is labeling and SDS changes. We talk about 2013, having your employees know what those label changes are and what the pictograms look like, and also what the SDS is going to look like. This interactive training will allow an employee to go on the computer and to scroll through an interactively narrated training session that has sort of, I guess, certain game-like qualities that will allow them to do little activities during the course to keep them interactive with the training, and it's not just a person talking for an hour. It's really about getting them to think while they're taking this course, and then there's actually a training quiz at the end of the whole thing. So along with interactive training, you got easy access, repeatable, consistent message. You got quizzing at the end, printable specific certificate for record keeping. You got moderate cost, minimal operations interruption. Your supervisors don't actually have to be there sitting there training someone in like ones and twos, especially with small companies. They don't have that resource to have someone there training all the time. And this is a great way for employees to get that, especially a site-specific type training that we also offer. So if you take a look at the certificates, they're going to get a printout like this that's numbered and has their name on it and tells them what the actual course that they took is. So along with the date, you have a complete training record there. We typically will have employees put forward this to the training department, and they can even sign off down the bottom if they want to. But considering that there's a confirmatory training course associated with this, you kind of have that as an integral part of the course. So anyway, I think we're getting close to the end here. I wanted to kind of open it up to questions, and I'm going to pass this back over to our narrator, Pia. If you're there, I would say, are there questions or any kind of comments that we can do to go forward?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Phil. Now, everyone, if you have questions, you can type it in the GoToMeeting chat feature that's in the lower right-hand side of your GoToMeeting control panel. Okay. I have one question here. What is the best option for obtaining the new SDS for labeling?
Okay. Can you say that one more time? You're asking about what is the best option to obtain an SDS?
The question says, what is the best option for obtaining the new SDS for labeling? Yes, from suppliers.
Okay.
From suppliers? Yeah.
Yes. So suppliers should have already, anybody who's a chemical supplier or has hazardous materials that they're going to be shipping out to consumers or other vendors, etc., should have had SDSs made up already, like new formatted SDSs made up for their material, and should have been actively shipping those out to customers in the past year. And I think, without looking at the deadlines, I believe like December 15th of last year or December 1st of last year was the cutoff point for when new companies, companies who shipping chemicals out should have the labeling elements of the all their products on the packages themselves. So it gave them a certain grace period to stop, to ship all the old labels and whatnot out, or replace the labels for the new products. And along with that, in order to develop the labels, you really have to have the SDS completed. So that should have been done some time ago. And I know a lot of companies are catching up, but I would go to my chemical supplier or manufacturer or whoever it is that you do business with, and ask them for an updated SDS. That make sense?
Yes, the question who asked the person who asked the question just said thank you. All right. I do have another question here, Phil. Do I need to
Yeah.
relabel piping systems with a new HAZCOM labeling system?
Oh, yeah. 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 No, so we asked that a little bit. We answered that a little earlier. I had a little slide that was prepared for that, and I looked at that some time ago. The OSHA does not consider piping systems to be containers, and therefore they do not need to be labeled with the new GHS compliant labeling, or OSHA HAZCOM new labeling requirements. That is not to say that you're not really required to identify that. However, it's not really part of the HAZCOM standard itself.
Okay. And here's another one that just came in. Do we have to hire another SDS company if our people do not provide ecological disposal or other regulatory information required in sections 12 to 15?
Okay. No, so I guess the same thing, as part of the earlier part of the presentation. We talked about sections 12 through 16 not being legally required in the United States. So as long as the person or the company that is creating the SDS or needs the labeling for their product is not shipping internationally, they are not required to go and hire another contractor to do those sections if they don't actually provide that. However, I think we're finding that a lot of companies are going for all 16 categories, just because of the fact that they may actually do business in Europe or in other countries around the world, and the 16 sections are required in some of those countries.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I don't have any more questions here on my end, so I'm guessing it's a wrap. So thank you so much, Phil, for today. That was a very informative session. So everyone, again, I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar. Be on the lookout for the email I'll be sending later today, and feel free to email me at info@coggno.com with any questions about training courses that's available or partnering with Coggno. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.